Teenage Nightmares Original, The Night Shift. Hi, my name is Marvin. This story takes place a few years ago, back when I was working at a local supermarket. I worked the graveyard shift, and it was usually just me, my coworker Daryl, and two managers on site. Daryl and I would restock the shelves and then gather all the shopping carts after the store closed. It was a pretty simple job, plus the pay was decent and Daryl wasn't too bad to be around. My only complaint was that the cart loading area always had this unsettling, creepy atmosphere. I can't explain it, but it always felt like someone was watching you. On this particular night, we only had one manager on duty. So it was just me, Daryl, and our manager Kevin. Because of that, we were all split up instead of working our usual routine. So neither Daryl nor I wanted to be alone in that creepy parking lot. So we decided to settle it with a good old game of rock, paper, scissors. I lost. Daryl chuckled, wished me luck with the ghost, and headed back inside. I glanced out into the empty and eerie parking lot. Unfortunately, all of the shopping carts were towards the less lit up spots. I put out my cigarette and made my way over to the carts. After putting away about 30 of them, I got down to the last few. These final ones were all the way at the end of the lot, in an area we called the dead zone, the spot where we often noticed the most unusual activity. I'd be lying if I said my heart wasn't skipping a beat. Usually, I'd be with Daryl, laughing about how creepy it was, but being out here alone, I was genuinely scared. I made my way over to the carts scattered at the far end. After gathering them all, I slowly started heading back. About 10 seconds into my walk, I heard low whispers coming from a dark corner of the lot. At first, I couldn't make out the sound. It was just a low, guttural noise. But then I heard it clearly. A voice whispering the word, alone, over and over, mocking me for being out there alone. I was frozen in place, paralyzed with fear. Then everything went dead silent. It was the middle of December, but the air suddenly felt even colder, almost unnaturally so, if that makes sense. I slowly turned around and started walking back toward the main entrance, but then I heard it, slow, deliberate footsteps following right behind me. I stopped dead in my tracks, my hands trembling as I reached for my flashlight. I pointed it toward the empty darkness, the very place I was terrified to look. But there was no one there. All I could see was my own breath, hanging in the frigid December air. I'd never felt so helpless, and just then, I felt it, something or someone grabbing my shoulder. But my ego would not allow me to be scared, so I brushed everything off to my imagination. Instead of letting fear consume me, I clenched my jaw and pushed forward, determined to finish the job. But just as I approached the final row of carts, the silence was broken. A single cart began to roll slowly on its own, the metallic wheels scraping against the concrete like a whisper in the dark. It moved with an unnatural grace, as if an unseen hand guided it. Despite my best efforts to stay calm, a wave of terror washed over me. My heart hammered wildly in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears. I could feel sweat beading on my forehead and trickling down my temples, an icy contrast in the dead cold of December. The chill of the night air did nothing to ease the burning panic building inside me. Then, out of nowhere, a rush of whispers surrounded me, like the hiss of wind through dead leaves. I stood frozen in the middle of the dark, empty parking lot, my breath hitching as the voices closed in. The whispers seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, blending together into a sinister chant. All alone, they murmured, the phrase repeating over and over, rising and falling like a twisted lullaby. The words wrapped around me, chilling my bones and rooting me to the spot. A crushing sense of isolation washed over me, an emptiness that went far beyond the empty parking lot. My pulse quickened, and without a second thought, I sped toward the rear entrance. Daryl would be there. He had to be there. I clung to that thought like a lifeline, picking up my pace, the echoes of my footsteps the only sound cutting through the silence. I was just 10 feet away from the door when everything changed. As I neared the entrance, I squinted through the light fog that had begun to settle, distorting the familiar shapes around me. For a brief, hopeful moment, I thought I saw Daryl's silhouette standing just inside the doorway. But as the mist parted, my heart sank. It wasn't Daryl. What stood before me instead was a tall, dark figure, completely featureless, like a shadow given form. It loomed there, motionless, yet I could feel its gaze boring into me, as if it was studying every inch of my fear. I didn't want to move. My legs felt like they were made of stone, paralyzed by the weight of its presence. But a voice, quiet but firm, told me I had no choice. I needed to put distance between myself and whatever that thing was. Whether it was supernatural or not, its aura was thick with malevolence. The air around it felt heavier, colder, like the darkness itself had taken on a life of its own. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my body refused to obey. Then, it moved. Not like a person, but like something unnatural. Its limbs jerking at impossible angles, as if it were breaking its own bones to drag itself toward me. The sound of cracking echoed in the silence, sending a chill through my veins. That's when the adrenaline hit. My body surged forward, my legs pumping, heart racing as I sprinted toward the front of the store. I didn't care that the door would be locked. I just needed the light. The safety of being somewhere visible. At least out front, I would be seen. And for a moment, that was enough. Just as I pushed myself into a full sprint, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps pounding behind me, matching my pace. Almost as if it were chasing me. My blood ran cold, and panic surged through me like a tidal wave. I couldn't look back. I couldn't afford to. Then, just as I was about to lose all control, I felt it. A voice, low and taunting, whispered directly in my ear. The laughter that followed was cruel, mocking, and it burrowed into my skull like an infection. My chest grew unbearably heavy, a crushing sorrow weighing me down from the inside. The pressure was too much, and before I could stop myself, tears welled up, spilling over uncontrollably as sobs racked my body. That's when Daryl appeared, stepping out into the parking lot. He found me, hunched over, crying uncontrollably in the cold, empty space. He was noticeably concerned for me. As he walked toward me, his footsteps faltered, and he stopped dead in his tracks. I looked up through tear-filled eyes and asked, "What's wrong?" His voice shook as he asked, "Who's that standing behind you?" A cold wave of dread washed over me. My heart sank into my stomach as I thought back to the tall, featureless figure I had seen earlier. I knew it was behind me, but I'd refused to turn around. Now, Daryl had confirmed it. The nightmare I was trying to deny had somehow become real. I slowly turned around, my body shaking, my breath coming in ragged gasps. And then I saw it. His face had finally been revealed, and I only wished it hadn't. His eyes, those eyes, were the deepest black eyes I'd ever seen. They were pure emptiness, pools of malevolent nothingness that seemed to swallow all light, all hope. They radiated evil, a presence so suffocating I could feel it in my bones. Before I could even open my mouth to scream or plead, it vanished, just disappeared, like a shadow melting into the night. As if seeing both of us out there had interrupted whatever plans it had. And in that moment, I was thankful. Thankful I never found out what those plans were. But deep down, I'm sure that if Daryl hadn't shown up when he did, whatever it was would have had much worse intentions than simply following me around. So, to whatever lingers in that parking lot, never approach me again, as I'm sure I won't be so lucky next time.